Live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Kempsey Shire Council's public forum. Our members of the public to express their views on items on tomorrow's council meeting agenda. My fellow councillors and I welcome and thank today's presenters for taking the time to prepare your presentation. I remind all people attending this meeting that it is being webcast on YouTube with vision and sound. A recording of the meeting is available on the internet and is required to be available for 12 months. Private recordings, including taking photographs by members of the public gallery, are not allowed. This ruling is to maintain the integrity of the meeting's proceedings. I would ask you all to please ensure all your devices, like mobile phones, are now on silent mode. On behalf of the Council, I welcome all people to the public gallery and observing live on the internet to this public forum. I acknowledge that this meeting is on Dunghutti land. We pay respects to elders past and present. We also welcome any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people with us. I now call for any conflict of interest declarations from councillors or staff. There are no conflicts. We'll continue to move on. Attending the public forum are councillors Simon Ferguson, Councillor Dean Saul, Councillor Scott Butterfield, Councillor Anthony Patterson, Councillor Kerry Riddington and Deputy Mayor and Councillor Alexandra Wyatt. Online at the top of the screen is Councillor Kenny Ring, and also there is Councillor Arthur Bain. We have no absences. Council staff in attendance are Mr. Michael Jackson, Acting General Manager and Director of Operations and Planning, Mr. Wes Trotter, Director of Utilities, Miss Lisa Davies, Acting Director Corporate and Commercial, Mr. Daniel Thorogood, Group Manager Governance and Information Services. I now ask the Acting General Manager, Mr. Michael Jackson, to outline the guidelines for this public forum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll now outline the rules for the public forum from Council's Code of Meeting Practice. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to address the Council. This time is to be strictly enforced by the Chairperson. Speakers at public forums must not digress from the item on the agenda of the Council meeting they've applied to address the Council on. If a speaker digresses to irrelevant matters, the Chairperson is to direct the speaker not to do so. If a speaker fails to observe a direction from the Chairperson, the speaker will not be further heard. A councillor, including the Chairperson, may, through the Chairperson, ask questions of a speaker following their address at a public forum. Questions put to a speaker must be direct, succinct, and without argument. Speakers are under no obligation to answer a question put to them. Answers by the speaker to each question are to be limited to 1 minute. Speakers at public forums cannot ask questions of the Council, councillors, or Council staff. When addressing the Council, speakers at public forums must comply with the Code of Meeting Practice and all other relevant Council codes, policies and procedures. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breaches of the Council's Code of Conduct, or making other potentially defamatory statements. If the Chairperson considers that a speaker at a public forum has engaged in conduct of the type referred to previously, the Chairperson may request the person to refrain from the inappropriate behaviour and to withdraw and unreservedly apologise for any inappropriate comments. Where the speaker fails to comply with the Chairperson's request, the Chairperson may immediately require the person to stop speaking. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I'd also remind everyone that Mr. Milburn is away today because of a family issue, and here's an apology. I'd like to remind all speakers that you have some councillors wanting to ask some questions about your presentation. These questions must only be on your presentation. Questions should be respectful and on the information you have presented. I'll rule out of order any other questions. Speakers may decide not to answer any questions put to them. Councillors, I again respectfully remind you that any questions you may wish to ask of a presenter should be direct, succinct, without argument. Direct questions must be on point or points the speaker has made. Succinct means no more than 15 seconds. Without argument means you are not attempting to change the speaker's viewpoint or opinion on an issue. We have 5 speakers, but one person is doing it twice on different matters. We have our first speakers are 2 people who are going to present on an item 10.1, Craig Campbell and Terence Stafford. The second speaker is Julie Coburn. The third speaker is Lindsay Kay. The fourth speaker is Mary Lou Lewis. And the final speaker is Lindsay Kay. So I'm going to outline what each speaker is here for when they step up. So our first speakers are Craig Campbell and Terence Stafford. They are speaking for item 10.1, planning proposal 154 Arakoon Road, Southwest Rocks, and they are ready to go. You have to press the button to make the red light come on. That's a trick. Thank you, Terence.
Afternoon, councillors and staff. My name's Terence Stafford from King & Campbell, and it's Craig. He's going to politely take a back seat on this one unless there are some questions later on. So, so with respect to item 10.1 being the planning proposal for 154 Arakoon Road, we would like to outline our support of the council report and the recommendations put forward to council by Council Strategic and Environmental Planning Department. We reiterate the strategic alignment of the proposal, where the land has been identified in the following plans as a future residential growth area. So I list the North Coast Regional Environmental Plan, the Kempsey Local Growth Management Strategy, and the Southwest Rock Structure Plan particularly. So at the ordinary council meeting held on the 27th of June last year, council unanimously endorsed the Kempsey Local Growth Management Strategy and the Southwest Rock Structure Plan. The local growth management strategy identified the importance of Southwest Rocks and the need to accommodate an additional 1,580 dwellings by 2041. It also specifically referenced the subject site for rezoning consideration. The structure plan for Southwest Rocks identified the site as well as being part of, which is part of the saltwater precinct, as being an area to accommodate residential development and allowing for a greater variety of dwelling types. So the planning proposal has been prepared in accordance with these documents, and the rezoning of the land to R1 general residential, as supported by the council prepared report, is considered a logical and appropriate extension of the existing Seascape Grove residential estate and the Southwest Rocks village. So we would like to outline our support for the council report and recommendation, and we are here basically to answer any queries or questions that council or the council staff may have of us on this planning proposal today.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Could I ask the first question, if I may?
Yes.
At the moment, the plan is to have 238 blocks.
Well, that's an estimate, so yes.
Estimate, yes. What's the estimate of if it wasn't changed for the R5 land to be subdivided into 1 hectare blocks? How many blocks would fit in?
I'd have to take that one on notice. We haven't done a design scheme for that purpose, but we most definitely could do something to that effect if council wanted that before their meeting tomorrow.
That would be good. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor Riddington is reaching.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. As a long-term resident of Arakoon, I don't have a conflict of interest, but I am. When you're talking about a greater variety of dwelling,
Yes.
would you be envisaging dual occupancies?
Well, my understanding is they are permissible within the R1 residential zone. So I
Yeah.
would imagine that they could occur on the land subject to development consent. I note that they'd be subject to the LEP and DCP controls that are in place. I know that council have recently exhibited their draft DCP or to get comments on their draft DCP. So those changes could occur.
I'm sorry, but I don't think we have put out the draft DCP,
Well,
have we?
There were
For
comments,
Southwest Rocks?
not for Southwest Rocks, but the DCP in general was advertised only recently.
Was it?
Do you need some clarification on that?
Yes, please.
Whittington? Mr. Jackson? Or you don't have to answer questions now.
What?
At the end. We'll get clarifications at the end.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you. I have
possibly-
a few more if that's
That's
all
okay.
right.
Yep.
That's
Councillor
all right,
Whittington, as I
Mr.
was saying, we'll have it at the end, and if the clarification gives you information that you would like to ask another question, well, I'll call Mr. Stafford back. Okay.
Thank you. Can I ask another
You
one?
may ask another question.
Thank you very much. Okay. So my thinking is there's going to be approximately 220, 225, whatever.
Yeah, that's our estimate of yield, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So if you have dual locks, that number could potentially double. Is that, would you envisage that you could do all of it in dual locks or some of it?
That'd be a guesstimate, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know what the appetite is for them to be dual occupancies from each individual landowner, but all I know is that the servicing strategy will be designed to ensure that, should that occur, that it'll be appropriately accommodated for in terms of traffic, sewer, stormwater, etc.
Thank you. I also noticed that that it is a wetland. In your understanding, is it a wetland or is it just wet?
No, it's not mapped as a wetland. There is there was 2 plant community types found on the area, and just bear with me for a sec while I look at my notes to make sure I get them right. But one was considered what would you call a northern Melaleuca quinquerva swamp forest, but none of them conform to a endangered ecological community or similar.
Were you aware when you put up your proposal to go to the department that Arakoon Road now has designated koala zones on it with speed limit, like warnings about koalas crossing?
Yes, I'm from Port Macquarie. I'm well aware of those sorts of issues, and I'm sure they can be designed and accommodated accordingly.
Okay. So another thing, have you considered in your planning, if you could put the 1 hectare or even 1 acre, I'm old school. So if you had even 1 acre blocks at the front of Arakoon Road, like bordering on Arakoon Road, and then houses on smaller blocks behind it, have you considered that, or is that whole thing going to be divided up? Red button.
Sorry, we haven't considered that, mainly because there's already, as Craig pointed out, there are already the 1 hectare blocks fronting Arakoon Road, and they will remain the same. But with the subject site, so being lot 9, all of the planning strategies have identified this as low density residential, which refers to the 500 square metre minimum lot size sort of scenario, similar to Seascape Grove next door. So we've stayed consistent and what the strategies have asked us for in terms of that low density. And just to sort of answer that question a little bit clearer,
Thank you.
with the koalas particularly, the proposal doesn't seek to connect to Arakoon Road for what would be a considerable point in time. The traffic studies have identified that we don't need to connect to Arakoon Road up until that final stage would be done. The traffic network through Bell O'Connor and Burrawong Drive through Seascape Grove are quite sufficient to accommodate the traffic that's required.
Thank you for that too. But also, I've always been really concerned, and I imagine you are too, and I have to frame this as a question. Are you aware that there is only 1 road in and 1 road out of that Bell O'Connor? And it has been envisaged to link up to Hillier Parade up near Phillip Drive. Wouldn't that be a thing to hook up to Arakoon Road as well from your side of it?
Sorry, my microphone.
all
kept
right.
going off. Yeah, potentially. Look, we did have a strategic bushfire assessment done as well, which is usually one of the key drivers for emergency accesses, and planning for bushfire particularly really does identify having those emergency egresses and likes having two ins and outs. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be necessary, mainly because the bushfire threat to the property is quite manageable and quite safe.
I kind of beg to differ on that. And here's another question. Were you aware that in 2001 we had a massive bushfire go through there?
Yes,
Yeah.
I lived through most of that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So just coming back on your question on koalas too, though, the high values environmental assessment that was done on the land didn't identify any koalas present, nor any koala food tree species present on the site as well.
No, I'll save that for tomorrow. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Any further questions? Councillor Patterson, thank you.
G'day, Craig.
Terence, sorry.
Terence. Just on your development proposal, I'm looking at it with open eyes, and I see it to be a fantastic next stage of development myself.
Could we come
I
to
do-
the question, please?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You've got to give me a sec to ask a question.
I'm waiting.
Yeah. In that, are you allowing enough that you consider in street width, footpath width, and also green space? I noticed that shows some green space there, but we're not showing, not that I can see any concept plans for footpaths, etc., for access for residents.
Yeah, no, sorry. Look, thank you for the comment, the compliment too. Look, this is obviously a strategic planning proposal at the moment. So that
Yeah.
sort of level of design in terms of footpaths hasn't been undertaken at this stage.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's something we would take, post-planning proposal and rezoning as part of the development application. The road reserves will be governed by AusSpec, Australian standards, those sorts of things. So those widths will be determined through that whole planning process. So, the typical road width of 20.15 metres will be there for the road reserves, and the actual road widths inside them will be dictated by that planning process and the needs for whether it be fire, emergency services and other vehicles.
Next question, as you guys as developers, have you ever thought about the jobs that are going to be needed for people to live in this area? So my question is, do you guys also have a industrial section or part that you're thinking that could be associated with a development like this? Because this is the question that I get all the time is, where are the jobs coming from for these people? So that's my question to you as a developer.
Just to correct you, that they are planners. They aren't the developers.
Okay.
Okay.
Development
Yeah.
plan. Fine.
So yeah, look, I'm just the consultant who prepared
Yeah.
the report on behalf of the landowner.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that. But look, I completely agree with you. But unfortunately, this site is only identified for residential use. Therefore, we can't add
Yeah.
any commercial or industrial
Yeah,
uses there with
I
it.
don't mean on that area. I mean in the township. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd have to defer that question because I think that would be outside the scope of this planning proposal.
Yep. No worries at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wyatt, please.
Yeah, thank you for your thanks for coming and answering our questions. I just wanted to ask a question. So you're asking our approval and then to refer the planning proposal to state government for a gateway determination. Then you're expecting that will be turned into the approval for that zoning. What next? What's the plan next? So let's say it's approved. What's the next
once the
stage?
planning proposal obviously is approved and the land would be rezoned, should it be done as proposed. So we'd be talking obviously about the 500 square metre minimum lot size, etc. 8.5 metre height limit. We would look to lodge a development application, and therefore there'd be further ecological assessments, further bushfire assessments, further assessment by council and their assessment staff. And once that's done, you would move forward to the obvious, that's where those details would come in with footpath widths, road widths, open space, stormwater management, all of that detail would come in during that DA assessment phase. And then depending on, the interest from the public, we could end up back in this position again discussing it again then.
And is that so? I'm assuming that has been worked on at the moment, or if not, has already been worked on. Is that a staged development? So I'm not sure if we've got the plan up there, but this sort of seems to be. I just had a second ago. It looks like you could do it in stages, at least 3 stages. Is that? Are you doing it as a planned approach, a staged approach?
Well, we haven't got to that level of detail yet. We're hoping to get
Okay.
past this hurdle first, but obviously there is scope there for it to be staged. And look, that makes commercial sense to do that solely because you don't want to flood the market. So, yeah, it's highly likely that this development would be staged. And it'd most likely start from the Burrawong Drive side and work its way across towards Arakoon Road.
Thanks. I was looking for the map and seeing what that side was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your microphone, thank you.
Sorry. Not sure whether this is an appropriate question or not. The history at Southwest Rocks and the development is that you get to a stage, a developer gets to a stage or an owner and then on sells it. Do you know whether the plan for the property owner of this is to take it right through, or they'll get a DA and then sell? Or is that not appropriate?
That's not appropriate because we don't know what the owner will do into the future. They're just getting the gateway determination at this time. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I'm not aware of what their future plans are in that aspect.
One question.
Yeah, in a moment. Yep. Thank you, Councillor White. Any further? Because I've got a question for Councillor Bain and then to Councillor Patterson.
I'll sit on it for a minute.
You'll come back if you want to. Yes, thank you. Councillor Bain, please.
Martin Boone, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you for coming in and giving a presentation. I'm looking at the plan, and one of the concerns I always have is the runoff and the stormwater. And can you talk us through the constructed wetland on the northern boundary on Athena Parade? And can you give us a bit of background on how that's operating?
Sorry, I'll introduce Craig. He's the stormwater engineer, so that might default to that one.
You'll have to talk to Mr. Trotter. He knows about stormwater too. Thank you.
All right, so I've got a little summary here for the stormwater just to run through. So the key stormwater basins have been located on that concept stormwater plan at the natural low points just along Athena Parade there. So there's 2 existing culverts under there already at Shamrock Avenue and the other one at Royal Pines Parade. So that's where the stormwater would be managed from both a quantity and quality perspective, just at that natural low point where it's going right now. It would most likely, going back to your question, it would most likely be a dry basin. That's how I sort of envisaged it, rather than like a wet area. Right now it is dry and it would be vegetated. With the planning proposal, there was a vegetation management plan that was submitted as well, which went into that vegetation regeneration in that area. So.
Thank you. Councillor Bain, any further questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Coming back to Councillor Patterson, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if this is going to be appropriate, this question about a covenant on the possible covenant on the land. Looking at making places in Southwest Rocks, let's say more valuable or more pursued because of their higher covenant on the land, rather than the whole place being all the same buildings. I know in the planning proposal, I know that the just at the moment is.
Could I interrupt? Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Patterson. Are you able to talk about covenants, or that's not part of the brief?
Yeah, it's probably a bit too early to be talking about covenants.
Okay.
Well, that was my question, because of previous developments we've had, and it needed to be asked, and it will be asked again when it comes.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Yes, I understand your point, but these gentlemen are doing the planning. That's not the covenant structure. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Riddington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one and a phrased question. Are you aware that Shamrock Avenue has massive problems with its drainage and siltage and weed growth? With the giant, what do you call them? Trenches?
Swale, whatever.
Yeah, swale.
Artificial
Artificial
constructed
stormwater.
wetland, I believe it is.
What is it,
Councillor
Arthur?
Riddington, I believe it's a constructed wetland.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, because there's a big problem with that.
I am aware that in that drainage channel, the water level does come up quite high because King and Campbell did work on the upstream Seascape Grove area, not the downstream existing infrastructure that's there. So in order for us to design on the upstream end, we had to investigate the downstream side of it. When we worked on the basin in Seascape Grove, we consequently had to upsize that basin based on our analysis that the basin that was in the major project approval wasn't big enough. So in the detailed design, we've upsized that even more to hold back water based on our findings and our analysis of that downstream channel.
Thank you. Can I please just have a follow-up?
You may have a follow-up.
So, is it your understanding that council pays for these drainage channels, or does the developer pay for it? Who in the end, when it comes to a problem, has to pay for it?
So the developer installs the infrastructure in accordance with, typically in accordance with council's standards and that. And so along the whole way, they're ticking the boxes to make sure that it's been designed in accordance with council standards, it's been constructed in terms of council standards, and then the ongoing maintenance after that is then council's responsibility to look after. But essentially, you're providing an asset to council for then council to look after in future. So if in future there was something that council wanted to do to change it, they could, but the developer has sort of gone through that whole process of, I guess, engaging a consultant to do it in accordance with council standards, build it in accordance with council standards, and then hand it over and check everything that it's been done in accordance with those approved plans. And that's the process.
Just a follow-up, please. Sorry.
Councillor Whittington, yes.
So, in your experience, would the Section 7 contributions of the developer contribution go towards that particular remediation if necessary, or maintenance for the future on those particular drainage thingos?
Sorry, I'll just answer that one as the sort of planning side of things. But so you're talking about the developer contributions in the Act and regulations. Look, they typically aren't levied against that sort of infrastructure. There are water and sewer charges in most development applications, but we're not at that stage just yet with this planning proposal. So yeah, council can charge bonds and maintenance requirements over these sort of constructed requirements. But that's typically, they typically have a limited time frame over those.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Coming back to you, Councillor Wyatt. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't have a conflict of interest other than I've been involved in the developments out here for a long time in my profession. And I'm looking at a map now. Do your environmental assessments consider what the environment is going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years? That is my main criticism of environmental assessment planning, is that it only looks at the here and now, and it doesn't look like, so what will saltwater look like? So, and it's not just your development, but what will saltwater lagoon look like? And the creek going in there, because it's all downhill, so the lagoon's at the bottom. What will saltwater lagoon look like, do you think, in 15 to 20 years?
Sorry, I'm probably not qualified to answer that, not being an ecologist. However, I do know that our environmental assessment carried out at least 3 surveys over this site, particularly, and studied all sorts of different environmental requirements over the land. But look, I know that there is that saltwater creek and estuary lagoon study, Craig, is that right? Yep. So that we'll be governed by that document as well, which council quite often refers to us in these sort of planning situations. There's a bit of a guidance document there to make sure that we are not having an impact on that downstream environmental ecosystem.
Thank you.
So
Another question?
Yeah, I'm just looking on the map here as well. So there's a drainage line that runs through this property and then joins up to, it looks like an artificially constructed something or other, like looks like a canal actually. In part of that, is it ingenious? That's the links. The links. Yeah. Well, is that where yours will be joining up to, which then flows
That was she's
down
talking
into
about.
Saltwater Creek? Are you planning to join up to that? Can you see what I mean? That.
Yeah. So as part of the planning proposal, we prepared a concept stormwater management plan, and on that plan, it had 2 basins shown at the natural low points for the site. So that's where the stormwater quantity and quality would be managed prior to discharging down through those channels.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Any further? No?
Just
Councillor Patterson, yes.
Just a question on looking at the council recommendation undertakes the subject to the gateway determination. So this will be going above council to be determined to start with.
Yes.
Yes. So it's been just for goodwill of these guys coming in today and talking about this.
Oh, they're doing a wonderful job for
Yeah.
us, Councillor Patterson. Thank you.
Thank you for being on board. Cheers.
That's a very succinct question. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Wyatt, please.
So I've just opened up the plan. On that plan, you've got 1 hectare or 2.73 hectares, which then goes into that existing culvert that you talked about before. Is that an open space, or that's not water, is it?
Yeah. So
That's not an open drain, is it?
so that's a catchment plan that you're looking at right there. If you just flick to the it might be the page after that one, the second page.
That's open space into there. That one.
Yeah, that plan there. So yeah, those 2 green shapes there, that's where the when I was talking about before about the dry basin. So
One over here.
in terms of when there is urban development and there's more roofs and roads and that, post-development, the stormwater is moving a lot faster than pre-development, hence the need to hold back in those basins prior to discharging into that existing infrastructure. So
Thank you. No one else seems to be asking a question. I'll ask one very quick question. What's the land being used for at this moment?
yeah, he's got a couple horses on there right now, so yeah, it's not being used too much really. He's just slashing the area and maintaining it, and yeah, just a bit of cattle on there.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. Campbell and Mr. Staff, for your presentation today. We'll now go to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Julie Coburn. She's speaking for 10.2, the exhibition of the Lower Macleay Flood Risk Management Study and Plan, and it's item 10.2. Ms. Coburn, thank you.
Hi. So yes, I'm going to talk about the draft floodplain risk management study and plan report, which I assume has been partially grant funded in a previous grant received in 2020. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the work done in preparation of this report by Jacobs Australia Proprietary Limited to present to Council. The 136-page report defines flooding behaviour and its impact on the community, identifies and appraises potential management measures to reduce existing and future flood risk. The key objectives of the study included an update of previous flood study modelling to redefine design flood conditions, understanding the impacts and consequences of flooding on the community, developing a list of recommended and prioritised physical works and strategic planning flood risk management measures, mitigation measures, to improve current and future flood risk, and assistance with the development of guidelines to manage future and proposed developments on the floodplain. After significant floods in 49 and 50, the community demanded action, and in this recent study, a flooding reference group was formed to inform the community about the study, gather information on experience of flooding in the study area, and provide an opportunity for the community to communicate their concerns about flooding issues. This was a positive step by Council to use local knowledge as part of this process. Extensive flood modelling and mapping information is included, and it's recommended that the subplan be updated with the consideration of the information and findings of this FRMS on the flooding behaviour for Lower Macleay. An assessment of flood risk management measures was created, which outlined 17 options, including pros and cons for each. The plan can be progressively implemented with an anticipated time frame of 3 to 5 years for high priority options and 5 to 10 years for medium priority options. Estimated costs and responsibilities for implementations were indicated. The timing of the proposed works will be dependent on Council's overall budgetary commitments and the availability of funding from external sources. Council is responsible for managing the existing, continuing and future flood risks for its local government area. Some of these recommendations are cost prohibitive due to the nature of the works involved, which would clearly be outside Council's current poor financial position and predicted financial forecast. Whilst this report could assist Council in applying for state and federal funding, there would be a need to be a reflection of the ongoing maintenance costs, depreciation and employment costs associated with the projects in the future long-term financial plan. I know that the community at large would have a vested interest in these matters, and I would expect that Council would be transparent in any future planning that may involve grant applications and possible borrowings. Land within the Kempsey CBD floodway number 1, which currently has historical residential and commercial development, has previously been rezoned E2 environmental conservation as a part of the ongoing floodway clearance program. With this in mind, I'd like to question why the following proposed grant-funded works have been excluded from this report. Community Asset Program Kempsey Riverside Foreshore Project Stage 2. This sheet pile raises many questions regarding whether it is fit for purpose, as the nature of its construction interferes with the natural course of the river flow and its interaction with the riverbank. The current state of the riverbank does not indicate the need for such works or impact public use of the space. Retaining walls may be appropriate where the topography of the land is too steep to enable other methods to be used effectively. The impact of this attachment to the riverbank will change the flow of water, in particular the way the water will be forced behind the sheet metal during high volume water events and floods. This in turn will create scouring of the bank and potential hazards to the public. The ongoing cost of addressing these issues will fall on Council and ultimately ratepayers. There is also the increased risk of persons who accidentally fall into the river being unable to pull themselves out of the water, as the natural slope of the riverbank will be solid metal walls. The legal ramifications of this are unthinkable. I've also noted there's a large number of already grant-funded projects which have already been approved, totaling over $20 million, and I wonder where these may align with this latest report. In conclusion, I again acknowledge that this report was comprehensive and will allow Council to update its own plans and policies. The sheer size and volume of the recommendations made can be considered by Council, but the community would hope that any future projects will achieve outcomes that are predictably affordable in the context of ongoing costs to them. Thank you. I know, well, I had to drop a bit out, so make
17 seconds spare. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Ms. Coburn, please? Right. Comprehensive report. Councillor Butterfield has one. Thank you,
Julie.
Butterfield.
You said something about not being able to get up out of the water. It does say there is steps going to be along that wall. So yeah, I'm not sure where you've come across that.
There will be steps. I believe there's quite a distance between them, though. I guess the point I wanted to make was the way the natural riverbank is now, because it is in a natural state, means that there's no future liability or effect on Council. If it remains in its natural environmental state, then the personal risk is taken on by the individuals. Whereas when you have a sheet wall, if a child, for example, fell in there because they're not visible, there's nothing for them to be able to grab onto to get out. If they can't swim, people can't swim, they can't get to the steps. So the litigation then, the problems then will fall on Council. It will become Council's responsibility. That was the main point.
Yeah, and I'm sure with the steps and the distance apart, I'm sure they would have check that. With the water flow behind the wall, the majority, there is erosion as slowly comes back, but most of the river flow is on the outside, not the inside of that turn. So I don't see it being a major.
You have a question?
Major thing. Yeah. Well, how do you see the erosion behind the wall being a major concern when most of the water flow was on the outside of that term?
Well, see, the difference being I'm talking about when you have heavy rains and potential flooding. The nature of the water flow changes dramatically. So you're going to have water that's going to come over the top of that sheet piling, over the construction of that, which can possibly get in, will get in behind that, which will create a scouring, because in certain parts of it, probably a little bit further downstream, it will create a scouring process. And that is where the ongoing cost of the maintenance will again fall back on council. So you're forcing the water flow into a different path to what it would normally flow.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, Ms. Coburn.
Thank you.
No other questions? Councillor Ring, Councillor Bain? No, thank you. Our next speaker, thank you again, is Lindsay Kay. He's speaking for 10.3 electric vehicle charging fees and charges. Charging fees and charges, that's the heading, but thank you, Mr. Kay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors, functionaries all. Not often you get to hear me speak for a motion. This is a novelty for me. At last, though, some positive news. I want to heartily thank Jessica Marsh for somehow finding a previously overlooked revenue stream for this apparently fund-starved council. The council needs to vigorously pursue all avenues of funding to prevent another SRV debacle. Unfortunately, the notice of motion and supporting business paper, which was 10.3.1, are short on detail and need further development. Crucially absent is a fully fleshed out business case. What, for example, is the cost of administrating the collection? The charges may have been provided by grant funding, but their upkeep is not. The power from the SDC rooftop solar is hardly free. There is the capital cost of the purchase and installation to be defrayed, and unless hours are limited and policed, charging at night would still be at a purchase tariff. How was the 25 cents arrived at if it was not via some factual business case? Research reveals that EV charging is typically done domestically at between 25 and 45 cents per kilowatt hour. The average is 38.84 cents per kilowatt hour. Public charges are costing between 40 and 60 cents per kilowatt hour. Perhaps in our straitened financial times, a rate closer to 60 cents would be more satisfactory. I note that at the last council meeting, councillors unanimously agreed to further burdening the Shire with debt under 10.12, which was 2024.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, point of order is what, Councillor Patterson?
You have to stick to the subject, charging stations.
Yes, I thank you for that, Councillor Patterson. I rule in your favour. We can't discuss what happened before. We're discussing what happened here with this motion, Mr. Kay.
It's relevant to whether a decision is made with the full financial facts in front of the council.
Okay,
and I'm suggesting that in this proposal they're not, and it's reflected in a previous decision that they were not, and I'm going to outline.
Well, okay, go on ahead and outline it, but you can't keep referring back to something else. We're looking for information from you on 10.3 electric charging.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Charges. So you just explain in detail why these charges are not up to the standard you expect. That's what we want to hear. But you're actually speaking in favour of the present charges.
Sure, indeed. And that's why we need to defray the expenses of previous decisions. That was another $77.34 every ratepayer has to come up with every year for the next 20 years, or to strategically minimise it, as is like to be done here. That's a mere 21 cents a day for the next 7,125 days. The devil is truly in the detail. So in supporting this innovation in principle, I would ask councillors to consider delaying the approval until the full business case has been developed and presented. This would additionally enable further consideration to be given to what the right pricing model is. This would be well worth the $110 1 month's delay based on the currently available data would cost for a better outcome going further. If the numbers stack up, it may be worthwhile installing more charging stations, especially at sites more likely to get visitors. One at the Kempsey Shire Council Yard may further assist in any eventual trial of electric vehicles. So I commend this measure to the council, but I would ask that they defer it and amend their decision to include proper financials.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. Well, I have questions, ma'am. Just to clarify, this is a motion or recommendation to us that we resolve to put it on exhibition for 28 days. I welcome your submissions on this because you've got lots of information there about the costings, and I thank you for that. Do we have any questions for Mr. Kay? Councillor White.
Yeah, I would encourage you to make that as a submission. But can you just run through those figures again? You said 38 cents was the average domestic cost, and then you mentioned something about 40 cents and 60 cents. What were they again, please?
Microphone, please.
Okay, well, the range is between 25 and 45 cents per kilowatt hour in New South Wales, which has an average of 33.84 cents. With public charging costing between 40 and 60 cents all per kilowatt hour. So a charge of 60 cents per kilowatt hour would be, commercial, especially given that we are a remote location. It's not like we're in the CBD of Sydney.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any further questions, Councillor Butterfield, please?
Thank you. I'm not into the whole electric vehicle thing, but if you're sort of suggesting that we charge 60 cents, do you have any idea what the current rate or other shires or states charge?
Yeah, it's between 30 and 60 cents.
Right, and you want us to charge 60?
Well, I'm suggesting that 60 might be achievable because it's being asked elsewhere, and with electric vehicles, because of range, we're a reasonably remote location, being halfway between Sydney and Brisbane. It's not like people get to choose.
What about how does 60 cents as it compared to say Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour? Because if we want people to come here, if it's not competitive, they'll just stop a Port or go to Coffs, wouldn't they?
I haven't done any research on what it is in Coffs or Port Macquarie.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Butterfield. Thank you, Mr. Kay. Any further questions online? Councillor Ring or Councillor Bain? No. Thank you, Mr. Kay. I look forward to your submission on the matter. Thank you very much.
Just made one.
Our next speaker is Mary Lou Lewis. She's speaking for 11.1. It's a notice of motion, statement of management intent for Crown Land Reserves. Welcome, Ms. Lewis, and your 5 minutes can start now.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to speak on this matter. I read it with great interest. Councillor Wyatt has recommended a statement of management for Crown Land Reserves. I think it's really important, and I'd like to highlight why I think that. And so there's a fair bit of background with what I'm going to speak about. I hope I don't go off topic too much. So I've been running SPADCO for a couple of years now, and I've been involved in flooding and fire and community angst and trying to protect the natural environment that exists at the end of at the northern end of Kempsey Shire. We advertise that area as a beautiful natural environment for the tourists to come to, and I think that's a really important point. The Crown Land Plan of Management, which came to council meeting last month, was something that was very important to us, and we put in a long submission, and that's why I've included it as an attachment to this meeting tonight. Very important issues occur on Crown land in that area, and they impact the community, they impact the visitors, and they impact the natural environment that we are encouraging people to see. Of all the recommendations that we put in that submission, none were taken up by the plan of management at the end. In my experience, I've put in 22 submissions and 4 significant letters of concern, and I haven't heard back from Hardly any of them. The concerns raised were not addressed by council. I've got a letter here from council with 22 issues in 2022 with a response from council of what's to be done. Of those 22 issues, 6 were addressed, 4 addressed fully and 2 partially. So I consider that the issues that we find in our area not to be addressed by council for whatever reason. I'm not having a dig, it's just the case. So the importance of having a statement of management with the intent for Crown land reserves to have the detail of cultural issues, of ecology issues, of tourist issues outlined in the Crown land submission that we put in would be beneficial for council to have a reserve by reserve document highlighting those issues so that I can draw on that document, show the community we've got a special spot here. It shouldn't be trashed, or we need to work on a walking track that's going through this area because people are going everywhere. Specific management issues that need to be addressed that we can see because we're there. It should be in a document that we can draw from. Additionally, we can draw from that document to get external funding. If the funding body can see that council have addressed and identified issues of asset, then we've got a better chance of receiving external funding for weed control, for example. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. Do we have any questions on the presentation? Councillor Wyatt.
Can you just outline for us Spadco's work in what you are doing on the Crown land dunes to the north of Stewart's Point, Grassy Head Lane? You're doing work up there.
Yeah,
Can you just outline that, please?
Yeah, council have been very generous in giving us grant funding to do some weed control. We got a contractor in to do some specific vine control where the littoral rainforest meets the beach at North End Grassy Beach, which we have spent, and that's great. Thank you. We're also doing a bush care day this coming Friday where 20 or so students from Newcastle University will be coming up to do a working bee to control lantana. No work has been done on grassy headland for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it's identified as one of the best Themata grasslands on the East Coast.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Ring has a question.
Oh, can I? Okay.
Oh, Councillor White, we'll come back to you after
only-
Councillor Ring.
Yeah, after her? Yeah, sure.
Yes, for sure. Multiple questions allowed. Councillor Ring, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you think the biggest issues in Crown land management are for the lands that sit in our shire that you're aware of?
I think some reserves get lost. You've got a lot of work to do, and I think that identifying specific reserves with specific problems or specific assets is very beneficial to tell the community what they have at their doorstep and to acknowledge what council is doing by it. I think some reserves just get dropped off the list and forgotten.
Thank you. Councillor Ring, a follow-up? No? Any further questions? Councillor Wyatt, back to you.
Yes, please. I just wanted to follow up the question with 20 students from Newcastle University is very impressive. How many people would you get at your regular events for your bush care days on the dunes from Spadco?
Last year we had our local community do a day, and I think I can recall up to 30, and they were local residents. There were no students involved with that. There was a lot of cakes that were made and eaten, so it's kind of a guess rated on the cakes made.
Yeah. So it's fair to say you're just embarking on these dune care works. So there's other dune care groups around the Southwest Rocks and
Yes.
at Hat Head
Yeah.
and Point Plummer. So you're starting out on your June care journey.
Yes, there was a history of June Care and it had faded away in the last couple of years. So they hadn't done anything in the last couple of years. And the students have been organised in collaboration with Southwest Rocks June Care
Mhm.
that are coming on Friday.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a statement of management intent or a management plan for those Junes would help you
Yes.
get grants.
Help us get grants, help us to promote the area within our community, sense of value, the importance of what exists there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any further questions, councillors? No? Thank you, Ms Lewis.
Thank you.
Our final speaker this evening, we head back out into the cold, is Mr Kay. He's speaking for 11.2, the notice of motion on a revenue task force. Mr Kay.
Good afternoon again, Mayor, councillors and ratepayers. Again speaking for something novelly. Thank heavens there has finally been some forward motion. I remind councillors and council staff that earnest assurances were made at the then Majestic Cinema in November last year that no stone would be left unturned to ensure that the need to raise the rates by more than the rate peg would not be required. And yet here we are, faced with a motivated community desperately attempting to assist council in successfully negotiating the financial dilemma. One would have assumed that this unexpected resource would be firmly grasped and welcomed wholeheartedly. Who would be shocked to find that it was shunned? Front and centre of the community feedback was that there has been a long history of discouraging input from the community from Kempsey Shire Council. This needs to be healed, or as Councillor Wyatt says, the trust bucket needs to be filled. And yet, on those increasingly rare occasions when even this limited public forum allows ratepayers to have a voice, I find myself pondering whether I should spend my entire 5 minutes blowing raspberries. No amount of well-researched and deeply considered argument seems to be heeded. This group that Councillor Bain is championing was a critical requirement even before November 2023, when all those sombre assurances were made. It is clear that opportunities have been overlooked, item 10.3 being a current example. Those of us in the Shire who take the time to be as well informed as possible on the financial management of the Shire have much to contribute. I would point out that ignoring us hasn't served the Shire well. A body of this nature impanelled with those who have the knowledge, skills, motivation and community mindedness to contribute would go some way to address the existing structural shortfalls in finances and public trust. Once again, the details and implementation will matter significantly, but let's make a positive first step to a positive future and a positive balance sheet.
Thank you, Mr Kay. Any questions for Mr Kay? I'd ask a quick question if I could.
Sure.
When you say that the council and councillors are not listening to the community, we have a lot of inputs, including the community. Do you think we should only go with what the community demands of council, or should we also listen to a whole lot of other financial arguments as well?
Well, I think that, as has been shown here, and also there are emails that aren't being responded to. This council has a terrible record of actually getting people listened to. I had a big sign here at the last meeting because I was denied the ability to speak. If you go out into the community, they say Kempsey Shire Council don't listen. Now, that is not to say that everyone out there, everyone has an opinion on this and that and the other. Doesn't mean that individuals get to have a say and their say gets to be what goes forward. That is why we have councillors. That's why we have a council. That is why we have democracy. But when well-informed submissions, and you can actually read the contempt to the response, like to the SPADCO response to the Crown Land Plan. There was contempt dripping off the response from this council to that document. This is what the community sees, and that's the reality.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Bain has one. Thank you. And then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm hearing what you're saying, Mr. Kay, and are you suggesting that that it might be good to amend that 11.2 to include community input onto that revenue task force? Is that what I'm hearing from you, or was it that you know, this suggestion has come from community, and I've heard it come from community and from other sources? So yeah, which of those is, or both? Thank you.
Well, reading between the lines in your notion of motion, I thought by referencing the community strategic plan that you were actually envisaging having members of the community on the task force. And if you weren't, then I would ask that it be amended to include that, because it was an assumption based on what was presented.
Councillor Bain, follow up?
No, thank you. That's clear. And I would like to reinforce the point that no, that's not a question. Sorry, finish.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, please, your question or questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Mr. Keys, you keep
Mr. Kay.
stating, Mr. Keys, you keep stating about council's lack of financial understanding and stuff. So how is council's income made up? What's the pie? How is it made up?
Don't you know?
I don't think we need that question.
No,
Councillor
the
Patterson.
revenue task force. So it's council's revenue made up by government funding. Is that something a task force can have some sort of say in? I'm just saying, because it's asking about a task force.
Thank you,
Government
Councillor
funding
Patterson.
being such a large part of council's budget.
Yes, Councillor Patterson. I think, Ms. Kay, do you understand that the task force would have inputs into how to get federal and state grants?
Well, that's a function of council, so surely yes.
Okay.
So is that not what council does already? That's a question.
This council is about half funded by grants, so yes, I'd imagine that you do seek them currently.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson, do you have a further question? No, thank you. Any further questions? No.
I'm a resource here, waiting to be asked questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And yes, we're open to all ideas, and at times it might appear that council is not responding, and at times things get lost, but I won't apologise because I don't know the circumstances of all of them, but I take your point. We can do better. All of us can do better on a lot of things, and we should keep trying to improve. So thank you very much, and I thank all our speakers today and the other members of the public gallery. You were the first ones, it appears, to try out the new very comfortable chairs. For those people listening, come on in and you will, they're not comfortable, says one member. Thank you very much. We will now close the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, everyone, for attending the public forum. And I wish you well out in the cold climate of Kempsey in winter. Thank you very much.